Hey guys, Caleb here with DSLR Video Shooter, and this is the new Sirui Astra Anamorphic full frame autofocus set of lenses that is available now. These are $800 at launch, $1,000 per lens once the Kickstarter ends. Yes, it's a Kickstarter, but Sirui's been around for a while, so you don't have to worry about them fizzling out on something like this. Quick disclaimer, Sirui sent me these lenses for review. I get to keep them, but they have not sponsored or paid me in any way. They're not watching this video. This video is, however, supported by those of you who have purchased my camera gear like Cineback. So over here, I have an FX2 with Cineback installed. You can instantly go from hybrid mode or stills mode over to a fully loaded cinema body with battery and tons of power options with USB-C power delivery, a power switch, and so many other features. So check it out in the link in the description. We have several more models coming soon. So thank you guys so much for the support. It means so much and helps keep these videos coming. So let's go ahead and dive straight in and talk about focal lengths. There are 3 focal lengths available at launch: a 50mm, a 75mm, which is actually what I'm filming with right now. I'm shooting in 16:9, but here's what things look like when we widen back out. And finally, a 100mm all T1.8, all full frame. I'm shooting this on an FX3. All of them are autofocus compatible, which is insane. So there's some amazing features with these and a couple kind of rough things to keep in mind, which we'll get to a little bit later. But first I want to start with the build. All 3 of these lenses are the exact same dimensions with the gears lining up perfectly. And the theme with these lenses, you'll quickly find out, they are nearly perfect cinema housings, but also fantastic stills lenses. There are tons of different mounts. I'll put all of them on screen for you here. So compatibility is going to be great across several different camera brands. So first we have the weight. These are surprisingly lightweight. They look like big beefy metal cinema lenses, but they are so much lighter than Sirui's typical size and weight. So when you grab a rig like this, it almost feels toyish just because of the lens looks so big, but it's actually really not heavy at all. But if you take a closer look on the sides of the lens, you're gonna find a whole bunch of really amazing features for stills and video. For starters, we have an autofocus and manual focus switch. And the way this works is it'll actually engage a traditional hard stop manual focus mode or disengage that ring and work with autofocus. And the autofocus is surprisingly good. You can see here I am using face detect. I can switch back and forth and it just works. One thing to keep in mind is when you switch from autofocus to manual focus, obviously wherever your manual focus ring is set is where the camera will switch back to. So it can be a little jarring if you're going to switch back and forth, just something to keep in mind. Just above the function button, we have an iris lock. So if you want to take the iris ring and switch it over into auto mode using your camera to control the aperture, you can put it onto the red A symbol and flip that into lock, and now you won't be able to adjust the ring on the lens, and all aperture adjustments will be done in camera. On the other side of the lens, we have the click switch. So when set to off, you have a smooth aperture ring. The only bump you'll feel is when you go from f22 or T22 over to auto. However, if you want a clicky aperture, simply turn it on, and now you've got those nice or not nice clicks depending on what camp you're in. So a really clean, lightweight cinema housing. We've got 67mm front filter threads with an outer diameter of 72. I do wish they had an outer diameter of 80 to be a little more compatible with matte boxes, but you can always use step-up rings. Pricing wise, these are available for $800 at launch per lens. They will be around $1,000 once the Kickstarter ends. You can also purchase all of them in a set with a case. I believe the full set is going to be $2,400 during the Kickstarter range, and then it's going to go up to $3,000 for all 3 lenses. Now let's jump into image quality. The first thing I noticed when switching back and forth between these different lenses is the color. Here we have the Sony G Master, and if I switch over to the 50 or 75 or 100mm, you'll notice that color is a little warmer on these lenses compared to the Sony. Another thing I was really impressed with was the color consistency. In the past, when I reviewed Sirui lenses, I have found that often across the same set of lenses, there's a big color shifts, whereas I found when you put all three of these together, you'll notice that they look very similar, which is a huge win and something I really appreciate. Now these are 1.33 times anamorphic lenses, so you're not going to get a big 2x super tall bokeh oval, but you're gonna get a little something there, so that's kind of nice. Again, nothing crazy. You can see over here just a little bit of that bokeh on the 75mm. Another interesting note is that breathing and other strange artifacts you usually get with anamorphic lenses is pretty subdued on these, so you're not going to get any massively wild breathing or stretching artifacts. You're definitely going to see a little bit of that, but overall very tame. Same with sharpness, chromatic aberration, vignetting. Again, they're full frame, so they're going to pretty much work with any sensor size. You know, they're not the sharpest wide open, but compared to other lenses I've tested in the anamorphic department, they are fabulous. So I would shoot with these wide open. I think that's where I'll mainly live with them. Quick side note, I'm just recording on my phone. As I'm editing this, I realized that this 75mm is looking a little soft in this shot, but in other tests, it is much sharper. So I think the camera missed, or I may have messed up my focus area on my camera. So just know as you're watching this A-roll that it looks significantly better and sharper. So somehow it's focusing toward the back of my shirt instead of my face. Now let's get to flares. This is where I have one of two big issues with these lenses. We'll get to that here in a second. But first I want to talk about colors. There are two flare options available, blue and neutral. This is the neutral, and as you can see, it's more warm, so just keep that in mind on these lenses. You're not going to get just silver. This is kind of a cooler light temperature on my phone, and it's coming up kind of gold. So there's that. But the issue I have with flares on this is going to be the secondary and tertiary reflections. You can kind of see right down in here, we've got this little orby thingy, which, you know, you might dig, you might not. And this is a pretty subdued, small point of light. But if you take a look at this footage that I'm showing on screen now, things can get kind of wild, depending on the light location, the size of the light, and the brightness of the light. You might get a second really strong flare, or sometimes a third. Some of these lenses, I believe the 75 had kind of a rainbow off to one side. So again, this is going to depend wildly on the scenario that you're in. If you've got cute little, you know, light sources like this, you're not going to get too much wild stuff. That's not really that crazy. But if you film with a lot of backlight, that could get kind of wild, which again, can be really cool. This is so subjective, but for me personally, I would have liked to have seen maybe just one primary flare, maybe a secondary that's more subdued. But when you start getting all kinds of stuff moving around the frame, it's not my favorite. And here's some more footage of each of the lenses to give you an idea of what flares look like when we have a light source very bright right behind the subject. And then I'll also show you where we don't have any flare behind the subject. Another note is going to be the minimum focus distance, which is traditionally pretty terrible on anamorphic lenses, and these aren't super fantastic. Here you can see me showing an SD card as close as I can get it to the lens with minimum focus. So nothing fantastic here. There are workarounds, and one thing I did play with and think I'll keep on the 100mm is a set of diopters. I have a plus 1.3 and plus 0.3 diopter, and once stacked and put on the 100mm, you can see how much closer I can get to the camera. So for product shots and whatnot, I think this is going to be a pretty sweet setup. I'll probably just leave those diopters on the 100mm, and that'll kind of become my macro. Then I'll use the 75, which is what we're filming with, and the 50mm as kind of my, you know, traditional lenses for filming. Then we have my least favorite, and oddly enough, also my favorite thing about these lenses, and that is autofocus. Autofocus is surprisingly just so good on these lenses. As you can see from this footage, if I have face and eye detection turned on my camera, it just works with these lenses. No complaints. I think it's really snappy. Accuracy was super on point, so love that. It's so fun to have anamorphic lenses where I don't have to adjust the focus. I can just film and just be completely free to focus on other things like my framing and what's in the background and lighting and all that fun stuff. But, and there's a big but, these lenses have very jumpy focus. So here you see me slowly moving my hand toward and away from the camera. If you take a look at the lamp in the background that is out of focus, you'll watch it jump pretty significantly and in a very distracting way. So again, this is going to depend on the scenario that you're filming in, but that is where you might want to switch over to manual focus. And I have found that these just really aren't very smooth when it comes to, again, slow moving object. If I do stuff like, this and just switch back and forth between focusing on my hands and my face, unless you're looking at that lamp back there, you're really not going to notice that kind of thing. And it just looks like a really fast autofocus, which is fine. And if you're a YouTuber, who cares? But if you're going to be filming a very specific scene, just something to keep in mind is that's pretty jumpy. And then the only other thing I didn't like was going to be the flares. So really wild artifacts or multiple flares going on. And of course that kind of green that can show up in those shots. Even blue would be okay, but once you get into green, it just doesn't look very good in my opinion. So those are the two weakest points on this lens. But again, for $800 for an anamorphic autofocus full frame T 1.8 lens that can do manual focus with all of these switches and buttons and everything, I think it's a completely slam dunk, and really I'm not bothered by those two things for the price. That's gonna do it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and we will see you in the next video.